The piercing wail of sirens shattered the stillness of our upscale street, just as the sun began to dip behind the manicured maples. My heart hammered against my ribs as 3 patrol cars screeched to a halt, boxing in our driveway. In the center of the pavement stood Brenda, our HOA president, her face a mask of hysterical triumph. She pointed a trembling finger at my wife, Sarah, who was leaning calmly against her new black SUV, arms crossed. Brenda was still screaming into her cell phone, fabrications about dangerous intruders and threatening behavior echoing off the neighbors' houses. It was the ultimate escalation of a petty neighborhood grudge, and Brenda had finally weaponized the police to get her way. She thought she was about to watch Sarah be hauled away in handcuffs. She had no idea that her call was about to dismantle her entire life. You must see, Maplewood Estates was supposed to be our sanctuary, a neighborhood of rolling lawns and colonial-style homes. But underneath the prestige lay a rigid hierarchy. The HOA board treated the covenants, conditions, and restrictions like the 10 Commandments, and Brenda was their self-appointed prophet. A retired auditor with a razor-sharp bob, Brenda spent her days patrolling with a wooden ruler, measuring grass height to the millimeter. I am an architect by trade, a soft-spoken man who just wants a quiet weekend. My wife, Sarah, is the absolute rock of our family. She is calm, observant, and frequently disappears for long, demanding shifts in what we vaguely called public service. We live in peace for years, mostly by staying under the radar, until we bought the new black SUV. To Brenda, the vehicle was a monstrous eyesore that ruined the community's curated aesthetic profile. She began leaving neon orange warning stickers on the windshield, claiming it looked like a tactical assault vehicle. We ignored the petty notes, thinking she would eventually find a new hobby. We did not realize that our silence was being interpreted as a direct challenge. The storm was brewing, and Brenda was preparing to strike with everything she had. The conflict finally ignited on a humid Tuesday afternoon when Sarah pulled into our driveway. She was driving her new department-issued, unmarked SUV, a sleek, heavy-duty black vehicle that practically screamed authority. But to Brenda, it was just another unauthorized commercial-style eyesore. Brenda was waiting, hovering near our hedges like a hawk. As Sarah stepped out, visibly exhausted from a grueling shift, Brenda marched over with a clipboard. She did not offer a greeting. Instead, she demanded Sarah's identification and proof of residency, acting as if she held authority over our street. Sarah, not in the mood for games, looked her dead in the eye and told her to get off our property and contact the board if she had a formal complaint. Brenda's face twisted in rage. She did not walk away. Instead, she pulled out her phone and dialed 911 right there. My blood ran cold as I watched her lie to the dispatcher, claiming a hostile individual brandished weapons. At first, I thought Brenda was just posturing. But when I heard her tell the operator there was an armed threat in the driveway, I realized she had just crossed a line she could never come back from. I stepped off the porch and stood beside Sarah, pulling my phone from my pocket to record. Brenda was pacing the sidewalk in a manic state, her eyes darting between us and the street. She caught sight of my camera and smirked, a chilling look of pure vindication. She began gloating, shouting that justice was finally coming for us, and that the board would have us evicted by sunset for our repeated violations. The contrast between the two women was staggering. Brenda was a whirlwind of frantic energy and lies, while Sarah remained perfectly still, her face an unreadable mask of professional detachment. She was the picture of calm, while Brenda was unraveling. As I moved closer, Sarah reached out a hand, stopping me. She whispered barely loud enough for the microphone to catch, telling me to stay back and keep filming no matter what happened next. She knew the law better than anyone in this neighborhood, and her composure was her greatest weapon. Brenda, meanwhile, was still talking to the 911 operator, escalating her performance for the recording. She began listing a litany of past sins as if they were capital crimes. She cited our illegal perennials, which were 2 inches too tall, and our suspicious late-night arrivals that supposedly disturbed the peace of the cul-de-sac. Every word out of her mouth was a procedural nightmare of exaggeration and fabrication, documented for the world to see. The narrative tension reached a fever pitch as the distant wail of sirens transformed into a deafening roar. 3 patrol cars rounded the corner, their lights painting the colonial facades in strobes of blue and red. The officers who stepped out looked battle-hardened, their hands resting near their belts as they prepared for a high-stakes confrontation based on Brenda's report of an armed threat. Brenda didn't hesitate. She rushed toward the lead cruiser, waving her arms and playing the role of the terrified victim to perfection. She truly didn't realize she was walking straight into a trap of her own making, and the total fallout was going to be absolutely legendary and final. Brenda frantically scrambled toward the officers, her voice reaching a frantic pitch as she pointed at Sarah, screaming loudly that the intruder was dangerous. But the lead officer, Sergeant Miller, didn't even look at Brenda. He walked right past her trembling hand, his eyes fixed on my wife. As he reached the edge of our driveway, he didn't reach for his handcuffs or his holster. Instead, he stopped perfectly still and snapped a sharp, formal salute. "Good afternoon, Sheriff," he said, his voice ringing out clearly for the entire neighborhood to hear. The silence that followed was heavy, absolute, and deafening. I kept my camera steady, capturing the exact second Brenda's face drained of color, shifting from a triumphant, manic red to a sickly, translucent white. The intruder she had reported for threatening the community was actually the highest-ranking law enforcement officer in the entire county. Brenda had just spent 10 minutes lying to her own deputies on a recorded emergency line, fabricating a violent crime against their own boss. The shift in the air was electric. Brenda tried to stammer a correction, but the sergeant's next words made it clear. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a major crime. The aftermath unfolded with a swift and clinical precision that left the entire neighborhood breathless. Sarah stepped away from her SUV, her posture shifting into full sheriff mode, commanding the scene with a quiet authority that silenced Brenda instantly. She calmly instructed the deputies to take a formal, recorded statement from Brenda regarding the weapon she had so vividly described to the dispatcher. Brenda, still caught in her own momentum, repeated her lies, unaware that I was standing 10 feet away recording every word. The moment she finished her statement, the reality of her situation shattered. Filing a false police report involving a firearm is a felony, and Sarah made sure the law was upheld to the letter. A wave of collective shock rippled through the gathered neighbors as Sergeant Miller turned Brenda around and clicked the handcuffs into place. The tyrant of Maplewood Estates was led away, her reign ending in public humiliation. Fearing a massive civil rights lawsuit, the HOA board met that night in emergency session. They immediately removed Brenda from her position and dissolved every frivolous fine she had leveled against us. The restitution was absolute. Brenda was eventually forced to sell her home to cover mounting legal fees and the substantial defamation settlement we won in court. The day the forced sale sign appeared in her lawn, the neighborhood held a party. We had not just survived, we had dismantled the woman who tried to destroy our family, and we finally had our peaceful sanctuary. Looking back, the irony of the situation is poetic. Bullies like Brenda survive by projecting the idea of authority, feeding off the fear of people who don't know their rights. But the moment they face real authority, they crumble like wet paper. Sarah still drives that black SUV every single day. And now, when neighbors see it pull into our driveway, they wave with genuine respect instead of the anxious fear Brenda had cultivated for years. We reclaimed more than our property. We reclaimed the soul of our neighborhood. If there is one lesson I want you to take away from this, it is simple. Your home should be your sanctuary, never a battlefield. Have you ever had an HOA official or a neighbor try to use the law as a weapon against you? How did you handle it? Let me know in the comments below. I read every one.